Welcome. I'm Michael Dixon coming to you live from Israel, and this is Stand With Us Connect. Tonight we are live with the IDF. It's evening here in Israel, and that will be coming up in just a moment. I hope you're well, and I hope that your family is well. You can see a full schedule of programs of our Stand With Us webinars on standwithusconnect.com. It has a fresh new look, and you can also catch up on Stand With Us content that you may not have seen. So like our webinar, for instance, with former Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs, viewed so far by 33,000 people, or our powerful conversation between a Holocaust survivor and his grandson, with 21,000 of you have viewed that since it aired on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, just a couple of days ago. Now, after today, we're back on Sunday with a special program, The Jewish Judge Who Stood Up to the Third Reich. This webinar will discuss a little-known case from 1935, when a low-level magistrate judge in New York, an immigrant from Russia, dared to confront the Nazi regime in Germany. It's going to be a great program, and I hope you'll join us again on Sunday. And a quick reminder that if you love the work of Stand With Us, please support us at standwithus.com/donate, particularly at this time as we're coming up to Israel's Independence Day. If you love everything that we do, supporting Israel around the world and fighting anti-Semitism, please do support us at standwithus.com/donate. Now, on to today's program. Don't forget, we're live and interactive. You can add your questions or give us a shout out from wherever you are around the world, and I'll try and get to as many of them as possible. Our guest today moved to Israel at the age of 13, and he served for 20 years in the Israel Defense Forces. He has extensive combat experience in Lebanon and Gaza as a platoon and company commander. He spent a great deal of his military career engaged in international relations, and he was the first IDF officer to be seconded to the UN, where he provided strategic intelligence analysis of combat zones to the United Nations. He's currently the head of the international media branch of the IDF's Spokesperson Unit, and as such, he's responsible for the IDF's public diplomacy, its media, its social media. He's the IDF's spokesman to the world. That's a huge effort. And it's my pleasure to welcome Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Michael. An absolute honor to be here, a pleasure. And I really look forward to the time that we'll share together, spreading truth, good information from Israel, and good vibes.
Thank you so much, and I know how important your time is, so we appreciate you spending it with us. First of all, thank you for your service, and to all the servicemen and women of the IDF at this time, and at all times, thank you very much. Clearly, the IDF is doing double duty, you could say right now. It's protecting the people of Israel, but it's also dealing with combating the coronavirus. How's the IDF monitoring the health and well-being of its soldiers?
So, our Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi, very early on, when the COVID-19 situation and the coronavirus situation started to unfold in Israel on a large level, he gave us clear directives and, most importantly, I think, clear priorities. Priority number one, as you alluded to, is to continue to defend the state of Israel along all of our borders, at sea, in the air, underground, and even in the cyber domain. That remains our number one priority. That is what we focus most on, and reality shows over the last 5 weeks that that is exactly what we need to continue to focus on, because nobody else will be doing it if we won't. Now, in addition to that, and we'll have lots of time to speak about it, we have also been supporting the national efforts in Israel to stem the spread of the virus and to deal with the consequences of COVID-19 in Israel, in coordination with all of the different government authorities, Ministry of Health, and many other ministries under the Ministry of Defense, and doing it in a way where we're saying, the IDF is saying, we're here, very willing and able to help, and we're at your disposal. And I'll be able to give a few examples of what we've been doing. Now, regarding what you asked, the first thing we did, almost the first thing we did, was immediately to understand that if we want to be able to have a fit and combat-ready IDF deployed along our borders, we need to have our combat troops ready in their bases, and we want to minimize the chances of any of our combat soldiers, most importantly, being infected by the virus. So very early on, more than 5 weeks ago, we sent at the order of the Chief of the General Staff, sent almost all of the combat soldiers and the commanders, and we're talking about a large number of soldiers, to the units, to the fronts, to the training bases, so that they were protected, encapsulated from what was going on in Israel as a safety precaution, so that whatever happens in Israel wouldn't affect the IDF's ability to continue to defend in the north, south, in central Israel, Judea and Samaria, wherever it is. So far, that has been working well. We started out more than 5 weeks ago with more than 6,000 IDF service members in quarantine, and now we're at around 900. And that's a reflection of the policy, which was very strict and very quick in the beginning. Anybody who we thought was in risk of having contracted COVID-19 was immediately sent to quarantine, and anybody who had been in touch with him. So we had large numbers in the beginning, but that appears to have paid off, that strategy, and now we're looking at significantly smaller numbers, and most importantly, a combat-ready, deployed, and fit IDF along our borders.
And you're testing soldiers all the way, correct?
Yes, we are indeed. Early on, we relied on the national infrastructure, what the State of Israel, Ministry of Health, and the different labs that already existed in Israel were able to provide. But it quickly became apparent that we didn't want to be a burden on the national system, and we wanted the national system to be able to test civilians, to quarantine civilians, and to get a grip on the situation, understand where the disease was spreading, etc., etc. So what we did a few weeks ago was to convert an existing DNA lab that we have in the IDF, which we have for the unfortunate business of identifying the remains of fallen soldiers. That's what that lab exists for. We are, after all, a military, and we need to have that equipment. And we converted it and received the approval of the Ministry of Health so that we had our own ability to conduct those tests. So far, we have conducted almost 7,000 tests on IDF personnel, and that has alleviated pressure from the Israeli medical facilities, and it has allowed the IDF a very quick response in immediately identifying where we have soldiers in which unit who may have been in contact with anybody who is sick, immediately sending them to quarantine, by the way, in a special IDF facility, and then continuing operations, training, and business as usual in the rest of the units.
Very impressive and very important. How is the IDF assisting in the general effort to protect Israelis against the outbreak on the home front?
So the IDF, as we know, we are the army or the military of the people. And what I've seen over the last 5 weeks is, and I'm not a very emotional person, the job doesn't allow me to be very emotional, but the last 5 weeks really have given so many beautiful examples of that bond between the people of Israel and the IDF. By the way, when I say people of Israel, I actually mean the Jewish people of Israel and everybody else, the citizens of the state of Israel. And I'll give a few examples about some really novel moments. The coronavirus isn't the only novel thing that's been going on. And we've had great examples of interactions between IDF soldiers and Arab Muslims in Israel, which we were kind of careful about before that started, but so far that has worked out very, very well. So in general, what we've been doing is the strategy has been to try to alleviate pressure from our national infrastructure, the health infrastructure. What we did early on at the guidance of the Ministry of Defense was to take hotels that were unfortunately standing vacant, since there are no flights and no tourism, obviously, and to convert them to makeshift hospitals or temporary hospitals for Israeli civilians suffering from mild symptoms in a moderate condition that were not in the need of very heavy specialized ICU care in a hospital, but could get by with basic medical treatment. So they were sent to these hotels. The first one was the Dan Panorama Hotel along the coast in Tel Aviv. I suppose many of the people watching have either been there or seen it. It's a lovely hotel, great view, etc. And that was the first one converted. And since then, we have opened up 15 additional ones. And we're talking about thousands, more than 3,000 Israeli civilians who have already been committed to these makeshift hospitals. Many of them have already gone back to their homes. And we're using them for two purposes. One, either as treatment facilities, or two, as quarantine facilities for elderly, disabled, or people who otherwise cannot quarantine themselves. They don't have food, or they need other types of assistance. So we've had that so that, again, hospitals and hospital beds and ICU rooms and breathing machines and all of that critical national infrastructure in these times would be ready, available, and preserved for the very specific cases that need them. In Israel, we're talking about, I mean, in terms of statistics, it's relatively, the figures are so far relatively contained if we compare it to other countries. And I don't want to be, of course, overly optimistic before we're through this, but we're talking about the unfortunate number of 193 Israelis who have died out of the disease, most of them with previous conditions, unfortunately. In terms of the IDF, important to state, we have had no significantly ill or affected IDF personnel. We've had around less than 200 service members altogether who have had mild symptoms, but none of them have been out of commission or out of capabilities, and no casualties. So hotels was one thing. Another thing was information. Early stages, we understood that the Israeli public was in great need of updated, timely, and accurate information, what to do, what not to do, where is safe, and what the best practices are. Information was really key. And what we did through the IDF Homefront Command was to launch a massive campaign, all of the languages spoken in Israel, through all of the different media available, and we also opened call centers. Now, the IDF Homefront Command really has experience in this, because that's the part of the IDF that is tasked with doing that in times of emergency, usually war. It also has these capabilities to deal with earthquakes, and there was a quick process of learning in how to deal with the pandemic. So working together with Magen David Adom, with the Ministry of Health and medical specialists who provided the medical guidance, we were simply the conduit by which Israeli civilians could call to call centers, or we would reach out and provide them with the information of the best practices, the social distancing, etc. So far that's been going on, and in terms of figures, we're talking about more than 500,000 calls being made to the IDF and MADA call centers. I'm sure that many of those calls have probably saved lives, because they gave Israeli civilians in Arabic, Hebrew, Russian, Amharic, English, and French the right information they needed at the right time. By the way, we're not closing down, slowly phasing down this center, because we understand that the Israeli population is more or less aware of restrictions. A third part would be active efforts out on the streets. And you may have read this seen it in the media. Israeli troops from the Homefront Command have been out all over Israel, and we have packed and distributed more than 3 million packages of hot meals all over Israel to locations where the civilian population was in need. Probably the most famous and focused city where we worked or operated was Bnei Brak, where we sent one of our best units, one of our best brigades, the paratroopers. We sent them into Bnei Brak, and they went door to door, and especially before Pesach, handed hot meals, medicine, and also helped in evacuating the elderly if they needed evacuation to these hotel facilities that I mentioned before. So that has been going on all over Israel, in Druze communities, Arab communities, Haredi, ultra-Orthodox communities, in regular secular communities and regular towns of Israel and cities. All over Israel, this has been going on, and it continues as we speak, also in preparations for Ramadan. So that's the third effort that has been going on. I'd say a fourth one, which I think is also important, it deals with technology. Now, the IDF has good, significant technological capabilities, whether it's high-tech. Most of it is, of course, aimed at weaponry, but we have technological units that are really good at taking existing technologies and then adapting them for new and different uses.
And this is normally top secret stuff, I would assume. I don't imagine that the kind of work that this unit does is normally that public. Am I right?
Yeah, you're very correct. That's definitely the case, and we actually had our doubts whether or not to say which unit was doing what, and we had it cleared by the military censor, and we were okay with dealing out this information. But the bottom line is that we had one of the a classified technological unit from the IDF Intelligence Directorate, which actually produces high-tech equipment for our special forces, Intel special forces. So you can just imagine the type of things that they are part of on a day-to-day basis. I'm sure that many of our enemies are very familiar. And at the end of the day, what they did was to understand early on that ventilators were going to be critical equipment in order to deal with a massive flow of patients to hospitals, and there weren't enough in Israel. So what they did was to take an existing home use ventilator, boost it, give it a control module, and then turn it into a hospital grade device that again multiplied by a factor of 10 and even more than that the capacities of the different hospitals in Israel. We've already had 150 of those units delivered to the Sheba hospital in central Israel, and there's an order for more than 1,000 more, which the IDF will produce and provide. And by the way, we have also shared the blueprints and the know-how on how to produce this with other select countries, with the US as well.
That's incredible. It's life-saving, amazing work that's saving lives here in Israel and also other countries around the world. Of course, while this is all happening, terror never ceases. We had yesterday an attack on an Israeli border guard. A terrorist drove a van full force into his body. He was in his 20s, and amazingly, I saw the video, he got straight back up and fought off the terrorist, who then got out of his car and began stabbing him. Now, I know the terrorist was shot dead, but how's the border guard doing today?
Yeah, I'm happy to say that he's being taken care of in an Israeli hospital. He is stable, doing well, all things considered, and there's no threat to his life. And yes, I agree. I saw the video myself. That was an awesome response. He's part of the unit that is actually part of the Israeli police, so not part of the IDF, but nevertheless, an Israeli security personnel is just like the IDF, a brother of ours. So I'm very happy that he's, according to the last information I have, he's out of danger. And we of course send best speedy recovery, full recovery to him and anybody else affected. But very importantly, the event ended as it should end, with a dead terrorist and no Israeli civilians hurt by this typical act of terrorism. But that's one example. But if we talk about bigger picture events, we continue to deal with active operational theaters along all of our borders. Gaza in the south, the Lebanese border in the north, and also the Syrian front.
And so talking about that, we've seen rocket attacks still happen during the whole coronavirus outbreak. We've seen even a UAV that was flown over the northern border. Can you elaborate on some of these attacks and some of the attempted attacks that have been happening despite this pandemic?
Certainly. So I think that the most serious event we had, or the serious events that we've had, have been along the northern border with Lebanon. And here we're talking about Hezbollah, the globally or at least internationally recognized terrorist organization that is holding southern Lebanon and many other parts of Lebanon hostage, stockpiling weapons behind Lebanese civilians, aiming those weapons at Israeli civilians, executing actually double war crimes at such. What they've been up to over the last 5 weeks, despite the fact that Iran and its proxies have been really reeling with the consequences of COVID-19, despite that, they continue to be active, and we've seen we know, our intelligence knows and monitors the fact that they continue to try to develop what we call precision-guided missiles in Lebanon. Now, I'll just say a word about that to have everybody understand why that is such a big deal and why people around the world should be considered about the fact that a terrorist organization ruled by Iran in Lebanon is trying to get hold of very sophisticated weapons and to become the first terrorist organization in the world to do so. What we're talking about is that Hezbollah wants to have weapons that are capable of being fired and hitting within a target area of less than 50 yards. Now, what Hezbollah has today are what we call statistic weapons or rockets, that they have to fire lots of rockets in a general direction, and they only have a statistic chance of hitting. What they're trying to develop now are precise guided munitions, which will enable them to strike almost any location, specifically in Israel. Now, once you start thinking about that, of course, you'd understand why we would be concerned, because a ruthless terrorist organization like Hezbollah would aim for hazardous materials in the Bay of Haifa. It would aim for the Ben Gurion airport in central Israel, for the Israeli Knesset, and for the Azrieli towers and any other sensitive infrastructure that we have in the state of Israel, and that cannot be tolerated. And despite the fact that lots of the, let's say, the bandwidth of international attention is focused on COVID-19, Hezbollah and the Iranians continue to operate. And the only thing I can say here, this being public medium, etc., is that we continue to monitor, and we have no intention whatsoever to allow them to achieve these capabilities. Last week, we saw a rather severe incident where we understand that Hezbollah targeted our fence, the security fence in northern Israel, and staged a provocation. We hold them and the Lebanese government responsible for that. And in general, I'd say that despite the fact that a lot of the attention is focused elsewhere, the northern front is where the IDF is looking operationally. There is the area that we see that the Iranians are still trying to entrench themselves. We issued a warning about a week and a half ago on our social media pages, on Twitter, in Arabic, English, French, and Hebrew, and Spanish, where we pictured a certain Syrian general whom we know, based on our intelligence, is working together with Iranian forces in allowing the Iranian forces and Hezbollah to establish themselves on the Syrian Golan Heights with the aim of being able to attack Israel from there. And we just issued a warning for him to be aware of the fact that we know what he's doing and that we don't approve of it. So that's the general state of play in the south, in the north, tense, and we of course have to be very, very vigilant along that border. Now in the south, in Gaza, there's quite of a different situation. We had that one incident of a rocket fire that you correctly pointed out. Since then, it has been relatively quiet, and what actually has been going on between Israel and the Gaza Strip is lots of aid coming in through Israel to the Gaza Strip, whether it is through Kerem Shalom or through the Erez crossing in the north, where the IDF through Kogat is facilitating a lot of aid coming in. A lot of that also specifically related to helping health authorities in Gaza deal with the COVID-19 situation and assisting them in containing it and preventing a spread. So it's a very delicate situation where on one hand, we share the interest and we understand that it is within our security interest to stabilize the situation in Gaza. But then on the other hand, we're still talking about a terrorist organization that rules the Gaza Strip. And as always, a fine balance to strike.
Absolutely. And it's amazing to me that we see anti-Israel organizations putting out misinformation, almost accusing Israel somehow of making a pandemic or a pandemic worse in Palestinian areas. And yet, based on the information you're telling us, not only is aid going through into Gaza as it is on a regular basis, despite it being ruled by Hamas, but at the same time, you're assisting and I assume helping also through international agencies, people within the Palestinian Authority, people in Gaza, despite at the same time having to combat Hamas.
I think it's very unfortunate that that kind of fake news campaign is ongoing. We're monitoring it, and I just read a report about it a few minutes before we came online here. It is still going on, and it is mostly on social media, but unfortunately we see a few Western media outlets playing along with that and echoing that type of those libels. I think it's dangerous and it's very unfortunate, and most importantly, it's false. The level of cooperation, coordination between the IDF, again through COGAT, the Coordinator for Government Activities in the territories, between Israel and the Palestinian Authority is actually very good. There's coordination in terms of which areas are to be closed. There is assistance from Israel in terms of testing kits, in terms of medical personal protection, in terms of sanitation devices, and even other types of medical equipment is being transferred from Israel to the Palestinian authorities, and joint training, best practices between Israeli medical teams and Palestinian medical teams. So nothing could be further from the truth. I think we're coming in to what could be a sensitive time. We're nearing Ramadan this night, and tomorrow Ramadan will start, a month-long festival for Muslims, which we of course respect, and we understand that it's a very important time of year for Muslims, and we want this period of time to go by as smoothly as it can, despite the fact that we are under COVID-19. So there's things to take into consideration here, and that kind of reckless and very poisonous information being disseminated should be stopped, should be condemned, and definitely should not be allowed airtime and to be retweeted and shared on social media, which is where we see it most currently.
And I saw, you mentioned Ramadan, I saw also that IDF soldiers were distributing things and helping in Arab villages, Israeli Arab villages prior to Ramadan.
So we just released a video a few minutes ago, I think, or we're just about to release one, working on it as we speak. Where, you know, in northern Israel, there's lots of Arab Muslim communities in the Galilee, the beautiful area of the Galilee. I lived there for many years and I really love it. We were up there just a few days ago, and in a small town of about 15,000 people called Deir el-Assad, the local health authorities recognized a few weeks ago that there was kind of a centralized spread and lots of contamination in terms of the civilians in that village. So the IDF was tasked with the, of course, the IDF Home Front Command at the tip of that effort to move in and to assist in maintaining a lockdown and to distribute food and medicine so that people wouldn't have a reason to be out and about and elevating the chances of spreading the disease. And the IDF has been on the ground now for a few weeks in Deir el-Assad and other Muslim Arab communities up north and also in the south where the Bedouins live. And what we're doing is distributing food just like we did in Bnei Brak, in Modi'in Elit, Beitar Elit, and many other Jewish, regular, secular, and Orthodox communities, with the purpose being to help the local community, in this case Deir el-Assad, the local municipality, to contain the situation. What we're doing, as I said, distributing food, medicine, but also facilitating a drive-through testing that exists in Deir el-Assad, knowing that we want to monitor the situation and perform as many tests as possible so that the medical professionals can understand where we're going and what measures need to be taken. So the IDF Home Front Command facilitated that as well, together with Magen David Adom and the Ministry of Health. And that's, you'll hear me repeat that many times, in coordination with and together with, because that's really the name of the game here. We're working together. Many times, you know, the IDF, in times of national emergencies, we're used to being at the forefront, literally speaking, of fighting and attention. In this event, we quickly understood that this is not a military situation. The IDF has many parts that we can contribute. And basically what the IDF, our chief of the general staff and all of the general staff officers said to the national leadership was, we're here at your disposal. Whatever we can do, we're good at logistics, we're good at command and control, we're good at Q&A, and we're good at mass information and a few other things. All of those tools are at your disposal, and so far that has been working to the benefit of everybody in Israel.
It's an amazing effort. We have some shout outs because people are tuning in from around the world. So take a quick break to say, Lauren Angel says shalom from the USA. Cynthia Lewis says shalom from London in the UK. Teresa Canan Wilson says shalom and love from Sweden. We have Mijuel, I want to say Lopez from Houston, Texas. Lynn Birgette is saying shalom. She's from Holsenbergen in Norway. Nathan Amar is saying shalom from Canada. Mirko Groth is saying shalom from Munich, Germany. Many more. I'll stop just there because I'll put a question to you from one of our audience, and it's Tammy from Virginia. We spoke about the threats in the north. She says, is Iran less of a threat since the corona crisis began?
Tammy, was it, from Virginia? So Tammy, unfortunately, no. That's the short answer. Iran is not less of a threat. Iran continues to be the same threat that it was before COVID-19. And what we've seen so far is there may have been an initial drop in activities, in the hostile and malign activities by Iran in the region and the proxies that they are puppeteering across the region, but that has kind of normalized out, and what we're seeing is continued activity by Iran and its proxies in Syria, by Hezbollah in Lebanon. And unfortunately, despite the fact that the Iranian people is suffering from the consequences of COVID-19 and how it is managed in Iran, we do not see resources being focused on domestic affairs, and we do not see less money being given to the Revolutionary Guard Quds Force, and we do not see a cessation of malign military activities in Syria and elsewhere, which of course focuses and prompts us to continue to be very vigilant, most in the north, but also along other borders in the south and elsewhere. And
of course, Iran has been one of the primary funders of Hamas and indeed much of the terror activity inside of Gaza. One of the phenomenon is, of course, terror tunnels, these kidnap and kill attack tunnels that have been created by Hamas to tunnel into Israel. Is that still a worry? And can you tell us a bit about how the IDF tackles the threat of terror tunnels?
Tunnels are a serious military threat. I'll start with the bottom line as it is today. Today, the IDF is one of the few the militaries in the world, and perhaps the only one in the world, that possesses the operational capability to detect and destroy tunnels, whether they are dug in the sandstone from the Gaza Strip towards Israel, or in the Rocky Mountains from Lebanon, not the Rocky Mountains in the US, but the rock and the hard soil from Lebanon towards Israel. And that's not only me saying as a spokesperson. What I'm telling you is battle proven, combat proven. We have detected and destroyed more than 21 tunnels dug from Gaza into Israel in the last 2 years, all of them using the technology that we have at hand. And over a period of a month and a half, last year, about a year ago, we were able to detect and destroy 6 Hezbollah cross-border attack tunnels that they dug over many years from Lebanon into Israel. Now, the aim of these tunnels is rather similar, whether it's from Gaza by Hamas and the Islamic Jihad or from Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's basically a way of getting under our defenses, finding a tactical weakness, and then trying to surprise the IDF and Israeli communities. And it would allow, if they succeed, Hezbollah operatives in the north to get into Israel, attack an Israeli community, perhaps abduct Israeli soldiers or civilians, and then go back into Lebanon, and many other horrible things. And that's why it's so important that we now have this ability to detect the tunnels and to destroy them even before they become operational. Having said that, we know that we're dealing with terrorist organizations that are also learning organizations and are constantly developing new tactics and how to overcome our defenses. They're looking to kill our civilians. We're looking to protect ourselves and our sovereignty and our civilians. and they look for new ways to overcome our defenses, and we find countermeasures, and it's an ongoing battle. So far, as we speak now, the situation is that we have the technology and the capabilities to detect the tunnels. That does not mean that there's any room for complacency. And it's by the way, the technology that I'm talking about was developed jointly by Israeli and American defense industries, and some of the best and brightest minds in Israel and from the US worked on that for a lot of time, and I'm talking about years, until we finally had that solution. And if there's people in the crowd who have been part of lobbying efforts and calling for their congressmen to support aid to Israel, military aid and research and development and tunnel protection, then you should know that those efforts have been fruitful, and they have been fruitful because we have that technology, and most importantly, it's operational and it has saved lives. Now, for those who care about Israeli lives, that's the key. But you have also saved other lives, Palestinians and Lebanese, because I can assure you, if Hezbollah would have been able to execute even one of the attacks that they had planned using the 6 tunnels that they dug, we would have been in a totally different situation. It would have been a situation that we couldn't, allow to go unnoticed and just contain. There would have been a very strong Israeli response, and that would have led to lots of casualties. So that kind of support, which is crucial, from the US, joint ventures working together with the Israeli defense establishment, has yielded fruits that are very important for our security and regional stability.
So important, and Israel is, of course, the canary in the mine shaft. What happens here doesn't necessarily finish here. And so with the Iron Dome and other technologies that have been jointly developed, you're mentioning the Israeli life saved, and you're mentioning the life saved of Palestinians and of Lebanese, but also, of course, these technologies will apply, I'm sure, to others around the world. So this really is life-saving technology. And you mentioned the cooperation between the United States military and Israel, and obviously the IDF is respected by militaries around the world. As this pandemic was beginning, there was going to be a major air defense drill, the Juniper Cobra missile defense, and that was together with the US and Israel. That had to be called off. Can you speak perhaps to the level of cooperation that happens with our American allies and with other military allies around the world?
Yeah, just to complete, what you spoke about before, the canary in the gold mine. So I know people who say that we're the off-Broadway to Broadway in terms of many of the novel terrorist attacks and techniques that we face, as in off-Broadway, sooner or later find themselves on Broadway. I know that Broadway is unfortunately closed these days, and I'm sure that we all wish that it opens soon and we go back to normal. Yes, I know it will, and I look forward to visiting again. But bottom line is that, yes, that's definitely the case. And you spoke about our outstanding bond and strategic link between us and the US Armed Forces. I've been in the IDF now for 23 years, and I think I have some perspective to speak about the intimacy of the cooperation between the IDF and the US Armed Forces. What I can say is that we are talking about training, development of defenses, and also sharing of intelligence. And each one of these 3 very important vectors of cooperation is growing in its capacity and its operational importance. First of all, it's very important to say that we are very grateful for that strategic tie that we have with the United States of America as a country, and the cooperation that we have with the US Armed Forces. That's important to say. And the best example of that level of commitment and mutual support is, as you alluded to, the Juniper Cobra exercise, which is planned and executed every 2 years. This was supposed to have been the biggest Juniper Cobra ever, with a massive amount of troops coming in, most of them from the US Armed Forces Europe, who are, in terms of the operational orders and what they are tasked to do, in a case of emergency is to deploy from Europe to Israel and assist in the aerial defense of the state of Israel against various missile threats coming from various locations, coordinating those efforts, the missile defenses between Israeli systems, US systems, and making sure that we have really a canopy protecting the state of Israel and most importantly our civilians. And unfortunately that exercise was postponed. We did, however, the Air Force managed to conduct a smaller exercise, actually a special one because it was a joint aerial exercise where there were F-35 jets, fighter jets, the 5th generation, the world's most deadly and advanced fighter jet that exists, where we had American and Israeli F-35s conducting joint maneuvers over Israel without meeting on the ground and while practicing social distance, which I think we're one of the few militaries who have done that. I don't know, I haven't heard of any other militaries conducting training, and there's lots of cancellations of trainings, but bottom line, we of course share our experiences, our best practices in how we're dealing with the COVID-19 situation and anything else that we're doing as we speak, and we have Israeli commanders speaking with their American counterparts, and I should say a few other militaries around the world, but it's first and foremost our American counterparts sharing information and best practices. Hopefully we'll all get out of this as soon as possible, and this is probably a good opportunity for me to shout out and say that all of us in the IDF are hoping for the swift recovery of all of the US servicemen who have been affected by COVID-19, and we hope that they'll be up and standing strong and ready for whatever missions very soon. And of course, they have our full support.
Absolutely. And could you speak perhaps to the extent that you can about the IDF's relationship with militaries and other in the region, for instance, friendly nations such as Jordan and Egypt?
Well, what I can say, there's a few things that I would rather not go into the details, but what I can say is that the peace treaties on a national level between Israel and Jordan and Israel and Egypt are absolutely pillars of our national strategy and for regional stability. As such, the IDF operates, coordinates closely with both of those militaries. We share assessments and we coordinate activities that serve the strategic interest of both countries. And we've learned over the years that the more you coordinate, the more you share, the better your chances are to overcome whatever challenge it is, whether it is Daesh in various locations in the southern Golan Heights or elsewhere, or if it's any other threat. And unfortunately, I cannot go into further details, but I can just say that we are very respectful of the Jordanian armed forces and the Egyptian armed forces. We have common security interests, and as the militaries of our countries, we pursue those in cooperation and to the benefit of our three countries. And we of course hope that continues and goes from strength to strength.
Before we wrap up, I want to take some questions from our audience. If you have any questions, you can post them now. We'll try to go to as many as we can. We have lots that are popping up here on my screen. So let me ask you, this comes from Steve in Brighton. He's in the UK. And he says, how do you as a spokesperson cope with gotcha journalists who just want to give a negative view of Israel?
Yeah, that's unfortunately still a very common phenomena. And not only gotcha, but really biased reporting and I'd say below par professionalism. The only thing that we ask of the international media when it comes to covering Israel, I ask for a correct portrayal of cause and effect, and I ask for a correct display of chronology. What happened before what? If those two things are respected, then we have a fair chance of getting a good enough representation in international media. Many times that of course doesn't happen, and we see that what Israel does in self-defense is unfortunately amplified and shown as aggressive behavior. And on the other hand, when we're attacked, be it Hamas in the south, Islamic Jihad, or Hezbollah, or the Iranians, that for some reason doesn't make the breaking news, but the breaking news come out only when we respond and defend ourselves, as we are totally entitled to do. And that's very unfortunate, but I'd say that there are a few positives, and I think that there have been various news organizations that slowly are becoming a little bit more balanced. We are concerned with online, with social media, where there's lots of, I'd say, dangerous and negative trends. We see lots of organizations, states and non-state actors using social media in order to spread hate and in order to foment violence, which is very bad. What I can say here in this forum is that we have our social media platforms, our Twitter, our Facebook, Instagram, and our website. And for those of you who want to get the information, and for those of you who care to get the correct information, we really work day and night around the clock to disseminate all of the information as fast as possible, mostly on Twitter, but on the other platforms as well. And whenever you're met with some kind of fake news or something that doesn't sound right, I suggest you check our Twitter feed or our website and find out what really happened.
And I don't imagine there's a military around the world that works harder on social media, doing the kind of important public diplomacy that you're doing, sharing real factual information, videos, the infographics you put out, everything is really first rate, and you and your team are to be commended for that. I have some shout outs for you. Esther Renza, that's our president of Stand With Us from Los Angeles. She's saying really appreciating this excellent update. Luke Maku is shalom from Fiji Island. Linda Cohn is saying you're doing a wonderful job. Stay safe, Israel. I have a question from one of our viewers here. And it's Dave from Los Angeles. He's saying, from your experience working at the UN, does Israel get any praise and respect, or is it just singled out?
That's a good question. I served as an IDF officer seconded to the UN for almost 3 years. It was fascinating. Sometimes it was a bit challenging and frustrating because I was really in the organization, not in the Israeli mission to the UN, but actually inside the UN. And I could see the different processes that as they were unfolding, how the reports were formulated, how
I don't know if our audience can hear you. I've lost
how the mandates for peacekeeping. Yeah, it is that.
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. And what I felt many times was that unfortunately Israel was so many times singled out and unfairly and unfactually treated. Now, I'm not saying that Israel is perfect in everything we do. What I'm saying is that from my personal experience in looking at UN Security Council resolutions and reports written, many of those things were not fair. What I will say, however, was a positive side was that I met as the Israeli officer, and whenever I met people in the UN, I'd at least say that many of them had respect, a professional respect for the IDF, which is good. Not everybody liked the IDF, but many of them had professional respect, and I think that's a place to start. But I think that a lot more work needs to be done with regards to institutional bias and the fact that there is an automatic majority against the state of Israel in various UN forums. I'm getting out a bit from my role as a military spokesperson, but I can speak about my previous experiences. And I think that there's many UN forums that are simply not doing their job because they're singling out Israel so unfairly as they are. And I'm sure that you're aware of many of the examples. But bottom line for me, it was a very, very interesting experience. Really opened my eyes to the challenges, the diplomatic challenges that we face. And it helped me in my current job to be able to formulate our messages and to try to tailor the information that we disseminate because I already know how the reports are written and how things are distorted sometimes in those reports, and I try to mitigate that.
Before we wrap up, I wonder what your message is to the supporters and followers of Stand With Us, from our high school and campus student leaders to our community members who want to ensure that the world hears the truth about Israel, and of course its servicemen and women in the IDF.
The first thing I want to say is a big word of thank you, really, to stand with us. If you didn't exist, somebody would have needed to invent you, and to do it fast, because what I think Stand With Us does is a very important, I would almost say crucial service to the state and to the people of Israel. And anybody who is part of the organization, contributes time or money, energies, thoughts, ideas, whatever, I really commend you, because I know from personal experience how important it is to shape impressions and to influence the perception of things. And I think that Stand With Us deals with education, deals with the public appearances, deals with the media, and many other things that are so important these days. And I know that you have a very good strategy of grassroots activity at the colleges and schools and really providing information. I said this as I was a volunteer mentor to young Jews and Israelis in New York when we lived there, through another Israeli organization, through the IAC. I said, the worst thing that I can see is indifference. And when people who are Jewish or children of Israelis are confronted with bias and with false information at campuses or in their local communities, and they don't have enough resources to combat that, and they don't have the knowledge and the emotional or the spiritual or the factual resolve to deal with it, that I find very, very unfortunate and sad. And I really think that it's so important to read, know, be updated about events, and what you do in Stand With Us as an organization is super important for all of the people around the world who care about Israel only being fairly treated. I don't think that we're asking for any special or preferential treatment. We're only asking to be treated as any other country, with all the threats that we face and that everything that we have overcome so far, and to be judged by our actions. And I think that Stand With Us does a great job at disseminating information and educating. And we enjoy a great relationship here in Israel with the Jerusalem team, the Israel team. And we really, by the way, I'd say another word, you commended our social media. I'll say that some of the things we do, I'm not ashamed to say, we learned from Stand With Us. In terms of the practices online, we have a great social media team led by Major Keren Hajiov, very talented, with a young group of extremely talented professionals. But we learn, and some of it we learn from Stand With Us as well. So a shout out of thanks and great appreciation. That's what I have to say on behalf
Thank you so much. And it really is a privilege and an honor to work with you and with all those who serve under you. As we close up, we're at a special time between Yom HaShoah, of course, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and Yom HaZikaron, the Remembrance Day for fallen Israeli soldiers and victims of terror, that will take place next week. And then, of course, Israel's 72nd birthday, the anniversary of the rebirth of the Jewish state. Let's finish with this. Perhaps I can ask somebody like you in such a prominent position in Israel's army for your personal reflections at this special time.
You know, it's going to be a very strange Yom HaZikaron and probably a very odd Yom HaAtzmaut. Yom HaZikaron for me, as somebody who was a company commander in Gaza in infantry and unfortunately lost soldiers and friends and even commanders in fighting terrorists in different organizations in Lebanon or in Gaza, it's always a very special and emotional day. And I think that the bond between the IDF, the State of Israel, and the bereaved families is a very, very, very sensitive and important one. and the fact that this year we won't be able, the families and us won't be able to join in the military cemeteries and pay our respects and hug, embrace, and share our love and appreciation for the families of the fallen. That, you know, is a hard thing. I've been going to, for almost 20 years, some of the fallen soldiers that I've been visiting and being in contact with the families, and this is going to be the first time where we can't. So we're trying to do many other things, digital videos, recording, phone calls, Zooms, and small and limited ceremonies that will be broadcast live from those locations. But it's going to be challenging and different, and not a good kind of different, but really a strange kind of different. I have, however, confidence in the strength and the resilience of the people of Israel and the state, and the bond between all of us, that even despite the fact that we can't mourn properly together, we'll get over this day as well. But I will say on a personal note that yes, it's going to be a strange one, and I do hope that next year we're able to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut in the grandest Israeli fashion, and that we can commemorate Yom HaZikaron properly next year, hopefully. This year, we'll have to comply with the medical restrictions.
Well, we look forward to that time very much, and please know that so many people, many millions around the world stand with you and will be with you and with the men and women of the IDF on Yom HaZikaron, and of course every day around the year. My thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, a man who I very much respect, does an unbelievable job, and to all the soldiers of the IDF for all that you do to defend the state of Israel and its people. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Now, next time on Stand With Us Connect, we're back on Sunday. The Jewish judge who stood up to the Third Reich. It's an incredible story that you'll hear. We'll discuss a little-known case from 1935 when a New York judge, an immigrant from Russia, he took on the Nazi regime in Germany. That's coming up on Sunday. Our full program is on standwithusconnect.com. Check out all the upcoming webinars. We'll also have programs for Yom HaZikaron and Yom Ha'atzmaut, Remembrance Day and Independence Day, all across Stand With Us social media next week. So please do look at those. And if you'd like to support the work of Stand With Us, go to standwithus.com/donate. Keep us going and keep us strong. Until next time, I'm Michael Dixon for Stand With Us Connect. Stay well, stay safe. Shalom from Israel.